Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, afternoon, or morning, wherever you might be. Excuse the dog being very sad in the background because she just got covered up. She'll probably go to sleep fairly soon. Hello, or so we hope. Good evening, afternoon, thank you very much for joining us. So plan for today is just for us to take a look at some of the new tech that we've been working on for 2.0. On the whole, our general line of thought has been for a while that we want to open up a little bit more with development so that people can see what we're doing and we are in such a closed loop and people can actually sort of have an idea of that we're not just sitting still and working in a black box while you guys never really get to see anything. So, little bit of audio desync on me as well. Sort of have an idea of that we're not just sitting still and working in a black box while you guys never really get to see anything. So, I am not. That's the fascinating thing. Not. And when I do... Wait. Wait.
They say it's gone now.
They're saying it's gone now and I changed nothing, so that's lovely. Yeah, so bear with us, obviously. First time that we are actually doing this. Let us know how the audio balance is and that sort of thing. I'm seeing you guys say that we are too quiet. I'm turning us up now. Sort of eyeballing it, just keep saying whether things are okay throughout. Is that echo gone now? Throughout. Is that echo gone? Yeah, I just had it for just a second.
Yeah, I'm way too loud.
That is fun. Yeah, I just had it for just a second.
Yeah, I'm way too loud.
Okay, yeah, you are. Okay. Okay, yeah, sorry about this, guys. Slightly janky, but we'll get there. So, yeah, plan for today. Assuming that everything's okay now. There was an echo for a tiny bit where I listened to the stream myself, and we're getting more delayed. I love this. And they're still saying you're way too loud. Okay. I've turned down Phi a little bit. Just let us know how things go as we go along.
Are we good?
All right.
Am I still too loud?
Yes, we are both called Victor, which does get a little bit confusing when doing this sort of thing.
Yeah, this is the fun part. Yeah, I'm still way too loud apparently.
Indeed. Oh, wow, yes, you are. Can you speak a bit?
Yeah, I can definitely speak a bit.
Oh, wow, yes, you were way too loud. Wow, okay, yes. Sorry about that, guys. Yep,
Is it
okay.
good, guys? Still loud. Okay. Yeah, I guess we'll have to.
Yeah, there's latency, so you got to bear in mind that when they said it was still loud, that was not there yet. Yeah, so now people are saying that's fine. Slight audio video delay for Phi. Phi, can you say something for a sec?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh yeah, there is. Can you restart your NDI?
Yep. Here we go. And back. Yeah, the stream will be recorded.
Yes, it will be. Let's see if Phi is ever going to come back. Because it would be kind of sad if not. The idea is that he should automatically come back. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Great. Okay.
Yay.
Delay should be a lot better now on Phi's end. All right. So, yes, the stream will be recorded. So, quick plan for today. We have more or less 3 things planned. First part is we want to talk a bunch about Landmass, our new world authoring process. It is very much the same kind of concept as Unreal's native Landmass, which was added in 4.26, I believe, but just with voxels. So we'll be talking about the tech and showcasing that a little bit. Then we'll have a little bit of space for questions for Landmass specifically. Then we will go into a talk about runtime voxelization based on like screen space gbuffer stuff, which is really cool, where we can just open any scene. You don't have to do anything for it, and you can just automatically voxelize it as you go, which means you get really cool voxel art without needing to do anything. It's a pretty cool stylistic thing. Again, space for questions after that. We go a little bit over the tech, etc. And then at the end, we'll have a little bit of a more casual hangout where I will be opening my personal hobby project in which I use Landmass and that sort of thing to just explore how you use it from a more artistic perspective, because the initial presentation is going to be from Fi, and Fi is an engineer, so we all know what that means. So without further ado, I'm going to let Fi actually go into his technical presentation-y thing. Little heads up. This is not necessarily super scripted and well prepared because we were kind of a little bit in a rush in the end.
It's going to be fine. It's going to be absolutely perfect.
All right, go for it. Do you want me to switch to your screen?
Yes, please. So first, a bit of a before answering, this is going. All we're going to show you today is Voxel plugin 2.0. So you won't be able to do any of what we're showing today just yet, but that's something we are hoping to release somewhere in 2022, hopefully towards the mid 2022. So a bit of a caveat there. So what I'm going to talk about today, as Goosey said, is a new Voxel Landmass workflow we have. And the way it's something relatively similar to the UE4 Landmass, as in it allows you to do non-destructive edits. So what non-destructive means is that you can say you want to make a cave somewhere on your map, and then 2 weeks later you want to move it somewhere else. You can actually do that without destroying any data and run it very, very easily. So that's what non-destructive really means. You can really do anything you want at any time and you're never losing data. So for instance, I can select this part of this archway. I can move it upward, downwards. And as you can see, it just works. There's no destruction. It's perfect. So yeah, we can use any mesh we want as Voxel. So each of these brushes is like a different mesh, as you can see over there. You can move them, you can scale them, you can do anything you want with them. We also have some kind of water support. So over there we have a small pond. And it's like a flood fill. So if I move this part of the terrain, the water is going to automatically fill that area. And if I move it downward, it's going to fill the entire thing. So it's not actual water simulation. It's like more like a very easy way to add water to a game. And lastly, we also have like some spline support. So over there, like I have a spline canyon, and I can like move this part of the spline to move things. So let's see. So I'm going to show you very quickly how to add a new mesh to the scene. All that stuff works. So it's very straightforward. All you need to do is press Alt-V on your keyboard, and that's going to enable the Voxel Landmass mode. And what this will allow you to do is if you go to a mesh, so here I'm using a pack from the marketplace. So if I take, for instance, this rock, I can then drag and drop it into the scene. And if I scale it up, you can see it's not actually a mesh that was dropped. It's like a full Voxel object created from that mesh. And I can like, move it. I can scale it that way, a bit like that as well. I can rotate it the way I want. So the thing you might notice at first is that the transition between the landscape and the actual mesh is not very smooth. So what we can do is we have this fun smoothness setting, and we can simply tune it to really layer the mesh with the terrain, and you can see it really helps sell like this unified feeling of the terrain.
Fi, can you put a mannequin into the scene?
I totally can. It's like a relatively big scene. I think I have one.
Yeah.
There.
No, the reason I'm saying it is because it's updating relatively slowly, but you stop thinking it's updating slowly when you actually see a mannequin in the scene.
Yeah, so that's the mannequin, but that's the scene. So it's like a very large scale thingy.
Yes,
it's like a huge canyon.
A ridiculously sized brush. Do you mind if I interject with answers to some questions right away, Fi?
Please go ahead.
Okay. So a bunch of people are asking specifically about water. Firstly, whether that's Unreal's water system, to which the answer is no, it is not Unreal Engine's water system. It is the material can use single layer water, but the actual water system is our own just flood fill based system. It'll only work for lakes. It's not a river system. It is very work in progress, but it is very much something that we want to explore for 2.0. Does the water have buoyancy like the 426 water? Not yet. Probably nothing really stopping us from adding something like that. So again, something we'll explore. And will planets have water support? And honestly, that's an incredibly interesting question and not something we thought about, well, talked about before, but I think we will want that to work.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to make it work, but we will try our best.
Yeah.
You might want to mute yourself with your keyboard, Goosey.
Yes, I do mute myself on the stream side. I just don't mute myself towards you. If you want me to do that as well, you should let me know.
Okay, it's all good. As long as you're on,
can we use splines to change the textures in areas? Yes, you can. You can use splines for anything, so that also means you can change the textures. Lumen is sort of working. It's not perfect, but it works.
I'll get into that later. Maybe I can go back to the presentation and we can go to the question at the end.
Yep.
Sounds good. You want to switch to the layout?
Yep.
Thank you. So yeah, so the smoothness really helps blend the mesh with the terrain. And if I duplicate this mesh, I add a new one over there, you can see it really like links the mesh together in a really unified terrain. We can also like add yet another copy, rotate it, and then move it like this. So see if I rotate it a bit further like that. So you get this kind of shape, and something we can do as an experiment is remove the smoothness on all of these. And you can see without the smoothness, it really looks pretty bad, and you can really see the individual meshes. But as soon as we start adding some smoothness to it, you really get, again, that very unified feeling. Something you can do as well, of course, is invert the meshes. So if I have this mesh, I can like invert it, move it down, and then I have a cave, and you start to see really the strength of the voxel compared to landscape. Because with the landscape, you really have to like make a hole into the landscape, add cave meshes, and all that. With voxel, you just you take your mesh, move it down, and you have a cave already. You can increase the smoothness a bit to make it like more nice on the edge. And that's it. There we have a cave. Another fun setting we have is a strength slider. So if we take this, for instance, I can change the strength to this. And what it's going to do is really lerp the mesh between nothing and itself. And that way you can really see the mesh growing into itself in a way. And this works with like, again, in a fully volumetric way. So if I move this one over and I disable the smoothness, you'll see that the strength will come from like both ways. If I raise the priority, yeah, you can see the strength like it's really going from like the top and the bottom at the same time. And this lets you do really cool stuff and really get a lot of variety out of meshes. So for instance, if we take like a skull mesh, and I drag that into this, so by default it's just like a skull thingy, so it's nice if you want to make like a skull island or something, but it won't get you very far and it will look repetitive pretty quickly. But as soon as you start playing with the strengths, you get a lot of variety out of it. And if you start adding this close to another part and increasing the smoothness a bit, you really get a unique shape out of it. As you can see. So yeah, one example maybe I can like add a new mountain and we're going to make a cave in that mountain. So if I go back to my rocks and use this one maybe, I can scale this one up way, way big. And this is really huge as we saw earlier. Add a bit of smoothness to really get that nice smooth feeling. And then I can take, for instance, this mesh.
I'm
move
going to
it
say
over
again,
there.
can you please put a mannequin in the scene so
Yeah,
that people
I
can see the scale you're working at? And also what voxel size is this world at?
It's a pretty big voxel size, so if I get a mannequin, you can see the mannequin over there.
Yep.
If we zoom back, yep, it's like so very tiny. And the voxel size, I think it's like 2 meters per voxel. Yeah,
yep.
That's it. So yeah, if we then invert this this mesh, we start getting a nice cave out of it. And it's like super easy to make this. Yeah, just go inside, makes a cave, and of course when I show it, it's broken, which is perfect.
Always how that goes.
Yeah. That's interesting, actually. So yeah, I guess we won't make a cave at this specific spot. Let's try another mesh. And see if that one works.
Perfection.
So this specific one has not been voxelized at enough resolution, so let me increase that really quick. There we go, and if I move it again, yeah, perfect. So if I invert this, there we go. Now we start getting our cave. I can probably rotate that the other way around. Perfect. So you can notice that the edge is relatively rough, and to fix that, we can increase again the smoothness, which is really like a fixable solution. And immediately you can get that super fancy cave. And so you could duplicate it, add another segment below, and make this huge cave network. Something we can also do while we're there is add some water to this. So if I add a new voxel water volume, I can assign some water material to this. And then I can scale the boundary of that water to fit. Let's not go too crazy. To fit the cave, I mean. Okay, I went way too crazy. And then I can select like the water center and move it up and down, and it's going to really create that perfect shape for the water. So you can see the intersection is like right there, and it doesn't go out of the voxel on the other side. And what I could also do, like I did earlier, is add like another voxel mesh over there to cut the water into. So yeah, another thing that we already mentioned is that we support lumen. So if we go back to that cave all the way there, you can see that we're getting lit by the indirect lighting of that light, the skylight. It's the sun hitting this part of the cave. And if we hit play, we'll be able to, okay, I guess it didn't select the correct character. I see, my player stat is way into the water. This time we're on the right side of it. So yeah, if we move a bit, you can see the very nice lighting from Lumen on the characters, coming again from that indirect lighting. And yeah, so that's pretty much it for the Landmass demo in terms of future plan to give you like an idea of where we want to go with this. We very much want to investigate having a more complete water solution that will allow you to like make rivers and stuff like the UE4 water lets you do. But with again the upside of like you can literally make any shape you want because it's fully volumetric. So you could have like a river going below a mountain and have like underground lakes and stuff. We also want to do some material-based displacement. So for instance over there, like you can see if you get close to this, the rock is relatively flat. But if we had displacement based on that rock texture applied directly to the voxel distance field, you would get really very nice shape out of it. So we want to investigate what we can do with this. And finally, we also want to do some virtual texturing. So virtual texturing is already supported, but the UE one is like 2D. So for instance, this pixel and the pixel below it would get textures the same way, which is obviously not what we want. So we have some ideas on how to make like a fully 3D virtual texturing solution that would let us do many fun things, like lapping objects into the ground and many other fun stuff. So yeah, that's it for the landmass. We can switch to questions now.
Okay, sounds good. So, we've got a whole bunch of questions. Do you specifically want landmass questions, or shall we just do everything that's come up so far?
Let's do landmass first, and then we can do everything else just afterwards.
Okay, then give me just a second. Just saw the question come in, is this built in the Git? Yes, all of our development work is always completely up to date on the Pro GitHub. So
Yeah.
if you have access to our Git, you have access to everything we show here. Okay, then gonna work top to bottom. Is there a performance penalty for using a lot of voxel landmass meshes to build a level?
There's like, of course, like a performance cost as a way. So like if you add like literally 1 million meshes to your scene, it's going to be pretty slow. Overall, it's very fast, and as long as you don't have 1,000 meshes overlapping at one spot, it's going to work just fine. So you can have this huge map with like meshes everywhere. That's going to work just fine.
Okay. Then beyond that, we have, can you use this with seed generation so worlds are procedurally created instead of pre-placed? And the answer to that is yes, because all of these are just mesh brushes. Well, they are actors. So
Yeah.
you can spawn these actors at runtime, move them around, rotate them, scale them. Everything you can do in editor, you can also do at runtime, which means you can just procedurally spawn the blueprints and it will just work, TM. So to that, the answer is a very concrete yes, and that is something that we're very interested in exploring with our extensions to Voxel Graph in the future as well.
So yeah, you could literally like have a blueprint at runtime brush, and the brush would like update. So you could have like a wizard character making like a huge tunnel into a mountain, or like digging a huge hole into the ground, or making a mountain out of nothing. So yeah, it's really limitless in terms of runtime performance and possibilities.
Of course, because now we're answering questions, I'm suddenly getting a massive flow of questions. Because that's how it always works. Is the compilation of the Pro plugin from the repository fixed for UE5? Yes, it is.
Yeah, it will break every so often, but most of the time if you go back a few commits, like if you look for a commit that's called like fix UE5, this one should work.
Okay. What about individual healing of player-created craters at runtime before we could only heal the entire terrain at once? So this is a massive perk of like the individual non-destructive brushes. The strength parameter that Phi showed earlier, if you have a crater mesh that you stamp as a subtractive brush, you will have a crater being cut out of the terrain. You can then slowly lower the strength over time to make that crater slowly fade out again. Now, obviously, you need to update the entire chunk's mesh, so this isn't something where you can, like, over a second lerp it out, but over a longer period of time, it is completely viable to gradually transition something like this out of the terrain again. Then... are these static meshes that Phi is dragging in? Yes. From a UX perspective, we found it incredibly important to make this as non-obtrusive to normal workflows as possible. So you hit Alt, when you press Alt-V in Editor, you go into a Voxel landmass mode where you can drag a mesh into the viewport, a normal static mesh asset, and it will automatically place a landmass brush of that mesh.
Literally any mesh is supported.
Yeah. Is it possible to show the voxels without meshing them? I wanted to ask for a little bit of clarification on that question. If you are asking about ray marching the entire terrain or something like that, the answer is currently no. Nothing inherently stopping you from implementing your own rendering module and ray marching it anyway, though. Because the data's all there for you. Just push it to the GPU and you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, just.
Just. Well, there is a reason we haven't done it yet, suffice to say. What is the FPS like in UE5 for a large world? It is more... Obviously, there are a shitload of variables here, sorry for the language. But it should be comparable to a landscape.
Yeah, overall the cost is pretty small, and we also have some new mesh simplification modes that can really help reduce the vertex count. So
it really depends where your bottlenecks are. If you are already a highly multi-threaded game, for instance, you do all of the AI simulation on a whole pile of threads, then you're going to have a bit of a harder time because you need to generate the chunks asynchronously. But it really depends where your bottlenecks are and how your world is set up. On the whole, there are no massive performance issues compared to other comparable world setups.
Next up would vegetation spawning slow this process. So yeah, foliage is fully supported with this workflow as well, so that if you move a brush, the foliage will update. On top of that brush, it does add a small impact of performance, of course, but it's mostly fine.
The main impact of that is that it takes a minute for the foliage to refresh. Everything else, I believe, will be done before the foliage refreshes. So the meshing, etc., is all done. So the entire terrain will update, and only when that is done will the foliage update. So it should have very little impact on the actual play experience on the world. It'll just look a bit janky.
And as always with the plugins, there's no FPS drop or anything. It's just a bit of latency in the update.
It's all asynchronous. The mesh looks pretty soft and the scales are huge. What about a scale 1:1? In this case, the scales are huge, which makes everything look blobbier and stuff than it has to. At the same time, there is an inherent limitation with us using marching cubes, which always blobify surfaces. So it's not possible with the current implementation to get super sharp corners or anything like that, but you can get a lot more definition out of the meshes than you do at this scale, because what Spy is doing is he's blowing up a mesh to 30 times scale, which means a single triangle will suddenly cover meters and meters and meters, which obviously also means that the voxelization can't produce any interesting surface detail. So when you work at closer to a 1:1 scale, you definitely retain a hell of a lot more surface detail, and that is also something that we will show later on in the stream. By extension, is there any plans to add more voxel types, like say marching tetrahedron? There are issues with marching cubes that tetrahedron doesn't have. We don't have any very concrete plans to add other meshing modes, but we are very much interested in exploring it. So I can't say yes or no right now, and I can't give you any specifics, but we're definitely thinking about other options in that space, because we definitely do see the issues of marching cubes. Lighting of this scene is indeed using Lumen. Already touched on that. Somebody asked if they could see the lighting in the scene with auto exposure disabled, Fi.
I'm not sure if that's possible. If you can share my screen again, I can is it? So if I go to detail lighting or something?
No, so Alt-4, go back into the main thingy. Show. I think it's there. Or is it perspective? Did they remove it? Wait, go lit. Go to the lights selection. There, at the bottom. Untick game settings and then set the EV100 manually. So obviously you'll need to... other way, I think.
Yeah, like this. So yeah, without auto exposure, this is how it looks.
Okay. Then we have a question on
about
performance.
VR.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a fun one. I think in VR you probably don't want to do the runtime modification, but if you were to use this for building a terrain, I believe it could run fine, especially with our new mesh simplification. Would have to benchmark it, of course. Yeah, it should run fine, and we can add option to make two static meshes as well if needed. So it's a really flexible pipeline. It's
Yeah.
going to mainly depend on what we like, what the use case is.
It's worth noting that the mesh baking thing, so baking the entire world to be static, is not implemented yet, but it is very much something that we want to implement for 2.0 because we see it as an important workflow.
Yeah, we have a backend for it, but there's no UX for it yet.
Yeah. Will there be a performance penalty for using a lot of Voxel Landmass meshes to build the level? We kind of already... Wait, that is the exact same question. We already answered that.
What's the landscape material we compatible with Megascan, Proshify? We have a pipeline that lets you use a landscape material on Voxel, so the answer would be yes.
Okay. Which parts of this system are using the GPU? And that is specifically for landmass. And I think the answer for that is nothing.
Yeah, currently nothing. I want to move some stuff to the GPU to let you do the displacement in a material shader.
Yep.
But outside of that, yeah, nothing for now.
If you remove voxels and expose the edge of the water plane, what happens? You were actually able to see this in the water section that Phi made in the big cave, and you can actually also see it on the left over there. When you reach the edge of the water bands, it will just clip the mesh. It won't reach the edge all the way.
So that's not the case here, but yeah, if you, yep. So the water only go up to the bounds. That's something I want to improve, but that's currently working.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Will there be multiplayer support in 2.0? Not a landmass question, but actually, I'm not going to touch on that now. I will say it's complicated. The basic answer is no, but yes, but mostly no. Will there be a way to flatten large pieces of planetary terrain to place cities on planets? The entire landmass workflow is currently very much centered around non-planetary workflows. You'd kind of have to... Yeah, I don't know. Depending on the curve of your planet and like how sharply it curves, you can either just use normal meshes, in which case the answer is yes, absolutely. Or you'd have to use pre-curved meshes to fit the curve of your terrain, which gets a little bit more complicated. And the answer is still yes, but it gets a bit jankier workflow-wise. Will there be a way to bake up changes into the voxel world so you don't have to create it at runtime? As we said before, the answer to that is a very concrete yes. Not currently an option, but very much something we want to support properly. Those are all the landmass questions. Do you... Wait, actually, I need to make sure that we didn't get any new ones that are on the same topic. I've seen a bunch of questions come up with regards to our plans for documentation. And the short answer to that is that we are very aware that our documentation is not great and we really, really want to fix that for 2.0. At the same time, we need to manage expectations on that front because we are a tiny company. So we very much want to do it properly, but to make sure that the documentation is always exactly up to date with all of the stuff that we're developing is always going to be tricky. So we absolutely want to do way better of a job than we're doing for 1.2. It'll probably never be perfect.
Maybe one last question for this one. Maybe two questions. So one is, can this be used with blocky terrain? And the answer is yes. I can actually show you that live. So I'm just going to my voxel world. I should be able to switch the measure to be cubic, maybe. And if I do this...
Unless you broke things.
I think I broke everything. Yeah, I guess I won't be able to show it live for some reason. But yeah, so the answer is yes, you can use it with cubic. Here we go. Yeah, so it's a bit of a mess, but you can use it with cubic. Yeah, that's because I'm in play mode.
That definitely helps.
And yeah, last question is, world partition, as far as I know, it should work. Like the actors will be streamed in pretty much, but we haven't really tested it, so we will have to see down the road how it works. I think we can end it here for the question about landmass. We will have more questions. We will answer more questions on the road. So if your question did not get answered, don't hesitate to ask it again. And now we're going to move on to the second part.
I also want to note that even if your question isn't answered right now, I am logging every single question, so we will get to it. So long as you have tagged me in your question, it will be touched on.
Maybe while it's loading, water on cubic probably looks very bad currently because it's not made for that. Would it be, yeah, everything is procedural, or like everything could be made procedural, so you could have like a blueprint spawning these actors. So in a sense, yes.
We got an interesting question on dynamic subdivision, whether in the future there could be dynamic subdivision to have more surface detail while keeping huge scales. And while not exactly dynamic subdivisions, we have plans, which I will not go in depth about, but we have ideas and things we want to try to see if we can squeeze more detail out of basic voxel terrains at a lower resolution.
Awesome. So yeah, let's move into the voxelization. So this is the Lyra Timo project from Epic Game. And as you can see, there's a voxelization post-process being applied to the entire scene. So if I enter play mode, we'll be able to see that more in detail. So as you can see, my player character is made of voxel, and if I run around, it's like, you know, animated voxel. If I shoot, you can see the bullets being rendered as voxel. If I try to kill an enemy, you can see the damage text. And of course I died. Let me restart with like the cheat enabled, so I don't die every time. Here we go. So yes, as I was saying, if I shoot an enemy, and if I could manage to hit the enemy, we should be able to see the voxelized text floating. Enemy, the dice are also voxelized, and yeah, literally everything is voxelized. I can also, just to be like this, I can enable slow motion, and you can see in slow motion really the mesh, the voxel really following the mesh, which I think looks so very nice. We can also, if we want to, change the voxel size live of this voxelization, so I can make it a bit bigger. So if I set this to 10 centimeters, I can be like a blob running around, which I find to be pretty fun. It's like a mix of like old games and new games, like the lumen lighting being applied on top of everything. And I can also show you another fancy map. So if I load this is a map with more foliage that I also showed in the demo. Here we go. So yes, here you can see as well, like all the foliage is being voxelized, live and animated. So you can see the grass moving with the voxel and the player character being made out of voxel. You can really run around. You can also, again, increase the voxel size if you want to. If I set it to like 5, maybe 3, 2. 2 is good. You can get that really, that low poly voxel look out of it. And it really works at any scale, so we can run around and it just works. It runs relatively well. And lastly, if
we have a request to enable stat unit graph, which I think is fair.
Yeah, let me this. And then there's also the stats in the top corner already. But I will enable the stat units as well.
Yeah, it might actually be that stat unit graph is hidden behind you, in which case I'll have to move you around.
Yeah, it's right behind me.
Okay,
Yep,
fine.
here we
You're
are.
now in the middle of the screen.
Yay! So it runs relatively well. We can get into performance later. It's not super fast either, but I'm still pretty happy with perf for now. The last thing we can try, so if I start play mode again. What I can do is only voxelize the player character. So to do that, I can enable to, like the player character is going to render into custom depth, and I can only apply the post-process onto the custom depth. And that way you can really combine different look into your game. And the last fun thing we can do is not clear the voxel data every frame, so that it's kept around, so that way you get that trail of characters. You can also like add a small delay, so it's only captured like every 10th of a second, and that way you get that pretty nice trail, I think, of characters following you. So of course the caveat is that it's screen based, so if we look the other way around, you can see it's just an empty shell and only the parts visible from the screen is actually voxelized properly. But unlike if you were to spawn like a scuttle mesh at every second behind you, the of impact is much smaller because this is all like a single voxel scene, so it's relatively cheap to render compared to rendering each of them usually. So I can really like run around for hours.
I want to touch on performance for just a second because it's very easy to misinterpret the stats that are on screen right now. What graphics card is this running on?
This is a pretty overpowered graphics card. This is a 3080 Ti.
Yeah.
This is without dynamic resolution. So if we...
And on a 4K monitor, correct?
No, it's like a 1440p
monitor. 1440p. Well, so the main thing that I want to mention that makes this confusing is that this is a post-process step, effectively. It comes on top of all of the other rendering costs. So as we all know, the Lyra demo is not super fast to render.
So what I just did is disable the voxel world. So like this is without the post-process. And you can see we're still at like 45 FPS, which might be because I'm streaming actually.
It definitely won't help,
I have a much better frame rate. But yeah, you can see we're like 40 FPS, and if I enable the post process, we're at a bit of a slower rate, but it shouldn't affect that much. We can actually even like do a quick GPU profile to actually look at the thing. So this is your frame. This is the part spent on voxelization. So we spent 2.6 milliseconds on the entire effect. And there are like some settings you can tune to make it faster, and there's also quite a few improvements still to be made to make it faster. Anyways, so yeah, this is pretty much the voxelization effect I wanted to show. Now I'm going to get a bit into how it works under the hood. So the way it works is it hooks right after the base pass is rendered. So the base pass is the thing you can see in overview. So it's a path. It's going to produce the world normal, the colors, the metallics, the roughness, all that stuff. All the stuff that you can output to the material shader. And there's no lighting applied just yet. So what I do is I insert this process right before the lighting is applied. And that way the lighting is still applied on top of the voxel and it doesn't look too bad. The way this works under the hood is there's pretty much for every pixel, or like every other pixel on the screen, I'm going to spawn a voxel. So to show you this, I can reduce the density. And I can also disable I can hide the base path rendering. So here we only have the voxel being rendered. And you can see for every other pixel on the screen, it's going to read the depth, find the world position corresponding to that depth, and add a small cube at that location. Like more exactly write a voxel at that location. And if you increase the density high enough, you get that voxelized feeling. And for the background, we fall back to the actual GBuffer. Yep.
Have you mentioned specifically that this is all ray matched?
I was going to get to it.
Okay.
So yeah, so the first step is you you have a computer iterating your base path and finding this position, writing voxel there. And this is not spawning an actual cube, it's just writing voxel into memory, GPU memory. And then I have a retracing path to render the voxel. So because of course, like even with Nanite, rendering that amount of cube at runtime would be very expensive. And it's quite glitchy actually right now. But it would be very expensive, whereas if you retrace, you can do a lot of tricks with voxel data to make it very, very fast. So the retracing I'm talking about is like running on like integrated graphics GPUs. So it's definitely not like RTX only or anything.
I also want to mention that the glitching that Fi mentioned just now is because he's running out of VRAM. It's not because there are like fundamental issues with the tech.
Yeah, it's more like settings are a bit messed up more than anything else.
Yeah, basically it's not set up to run very well right now. It's just set up to be
work somewhat
and sort of usable.
And yeah, there's like a depth thing you can configure to only voxelize stuff nearby to help with performance as well. Yeah, so I think that's the overall overview of the effect. Our idea with it is that you would be able to use it to mainly, the main use case that I have in mind for it is to use it to voxelize player characters or foliage or at least dynamic stuff. So the idea would be that you would render these things to custom depth, and then the rest of the scene would be rendered with a more static voxel method. So you would like voxelize the floor offline and then use the more standard cubic pipeline of the plugin to render it. And what this process would really give you is that animation part. It would be incredibly hard to do without it.
Yeah, so also a really fun thing with this is like, effects that you spawn. So for instance, the Lyra demo has hit text for when you take damage, and that gets automatically voxelized even as it's being animated, which is really cool. But also it means you can have foliage in your world and have that foliage actually have wind animation and it'll still be nice and voxely, which would be more tricky if it was part of the actual voxel world.
So yes, that's it for this part as well. I think we can move on to the questions.
Okay. Then let's see, there's a bunch of stuff here. I'm quickly going to go through from the top because I thought there was something about this at the start, but I don't think so. Okay. Will there be an option to voxelize VFX? I'm assuming that is with regards to specifically this section of the talk, because this was already asked before we got to this section of the talk. The answer for that is yes, and it needs to be in the base pass to be voxelized, which means it needs to be not translucent. If you have opaque VFX, they will voxelize. If they are translucent, they will not.
Yeah. So for instance, like there are like some bullets being spawned with Niagara, and this is like meshes rendered in the base pass, so they are voxelized. But for instance, like the particle effect on top of these things are not voxelized because they are applied after the voxelization is done.
Okay. Of course, more questions coming in now again because we are now taking questions. Let's see. I'm trying to pick out specifically the voxelization questions. Will real-time voxelization be available in the free version? Honestly, no idea.
Yeah, I would still say probably, like no promise on it, but probably. We will see when we actually get to that point.
Yeah. Somebody asked, I believe Vince asked, do you plan to implement microvoxels? And I didn't have the headspace to chat when that was asked, but I wanted to ask for clarification on that question because I didn't quite get it. How does water look on the cubic mode, and will it be compatible with procedural worlds? So the cubic mode... Okay. World TLDR, again, the base pass if it's translucent, it won't voxelize. If it's not translucent, it
Yeah,
will
I think it's a
voxelize.
question about like for Landmass and not for this one.
Okay. Real-time voxelization performance. Well, we sort of already touched on it. I want to go a little bit more in depth on specifically like how this works, because it is not a constant cost. There are a bunch of things controlling the cost of the voxelization, and I think Phi is going to actually show the stats right now.
Yeah, so for instance, if we take this is relatively voxel size, and the effect only costs 1.4 millisecond currently, and it could probably be brought down to 1 millisecond with optimization, but basically it depends on several factors. How big your voxel size is, which can impact how many voxel you're spawning, what kind of voxelization scale you can get away with, meaning like what kind of step you can get away with between pixels that actually spawn a cube, the max distance you're spawning cubes at, and all these parameters are going to control how many voxel are being spawned every frame, and then that's going to affect like both like the performance, because it takes time to write this voxel, and the performance also of the rendering. And if you were to only use this technique to render like one character, like here, it could be made very, very efficient, because you only need to retrace like one specific part of the screen. So it's much, much cheaper than the overall effect.
Yeah, so the performance overhead of the feature is based on various different things, and it is always on top of all of the other rendering costs of the scene, because it's not a special rendering mode, it's an extra step added on top. Somebody asked an interesting question. Instead of storing the characters, can you photogrammetry the entire level while going through and looking at every corner of the map and then rebuild the scene? It was actually Asher that asked that. And the answer to that is it's not a thing yet, but we really want it to be a thing.
Yeah, it could very easily be a thing. So let me show you that while the game is reloading.
It's great how every time, right as I switch back to the two-way camera, you go, let me show you.
So if I do
Clear
this, so yeah, you can see I can like move around and like scan the scene, and it's going to keep the data stored really like photogrammetry, as I just said. And you can really run around, and the idea would be that you would be able to then export the data to have that static scene I was talking about. Something I also want to do is just have a mode that does that for you automatically. Because if you think about it, like you don't really need to run around to voxelize all this. You could have like have a setup that would do that for you automatically. So I want to add that as well. But yeah, this could open the way to voxelizing meshes in a very efficient way.
We have got the question, are you using nanite with the voxelization? As we mentioned, no, because this is all custom Raymuch stuff rather than just being triangles being thrown at the rasterizer.
It does work on top of nanite, so if you had nanite meshes, you could voxelize them using this.
Yeah, and again, this is being done on top of the scene cost, so if your scene renders faster when it's using nanite, enable nanite to have your scene render faster, because like it's an additive cost. It's not a replacement. This works on both static or not, so stuff like water working like your character is doing. Yes, so assuming your water is opaque, you can have nice little animated water waves and that sort of thing just be voxelized on the fly. The core intention behind this is to allow you to produce voxel-looking versions of things that aren't usually something you can voxelize easily. So specifically dynamic things like water waves, like trees, like characters.
Really quick, maybe if we have a look at what I'm doing right now, you can see like each of these voxels is like a very small cube, and you can have a look at the size of the scene. So this is without rendering the G buffer at all, I think. Yeah, this is only rendering the voxel. And so you can already see this is why retracing is needed, because we can get away with a relatively fast rendering speed compared to the mess that would be with if we were to spawn like literally one cube mesh per thing, because I think we have like several millions of them now.
Vince has clarified his question, and that he's referring specifically to the area around the player, so like the LOD 0 section. The limiting factor when it comes to detail with this is the amount of voxels that you're placing down. So you're placing down 1 voxel per X pixels. The more of those voxels that you're placing down, the slower the entire thing gets. But the voxels are a set size in the world, so you inherently lose detail at a distance. And there isn't really anything you can do about that other than just throwing more GPU horsepower at it, which is absolutely an option. But obviously that's kind of an exponential increase in cost because you're working with voxels. So that goes up very quickly. Let's see, do we have anything else on this? Touched on that. Can we do destructible stuff like this with this, like digging a hole on the outside scene or chopping a tree? This is a little bit of a complicated topic. It's very much something we want to explore. By the nature of it, because you're capturing the G buffer, it's a bit complicated.
So one way I could see it working is that you could like do what I'm doing to capture the scene as a voxel asset. And then once you have this data, you would be able to destroy it using voxel tools. So like even in like Niagara particle or something, you could have each Niagara particle making a small hole into the scene, with the caveat that what we're capturing is really a shell of the scene. So if you make a hole into this pillar, it's going to be empty inside, which might not look too great.
Realistically, there's probably things that we can do to sort of mitigate that, but it's all extra complexity. So 2 questions more on this specific topic. Can you mask things to be in or out of the voxelization? We touched on this before. Basically, you can filter by custom depth, so you can have only certain objects render into custom depth, set that to be the filter for the voxel world, and then only those objects will render into it, so you can only have characters do it, only have some trees do it, that sort of thing. Full flexibility there. So long as you're not already using your custom depth for something else, that is tricky. But that kind of is what it is. And then not a question but a statement, but an interesting statement. Smooth voxels plus voxelization. This is really tricky. I'm switching to the 2-way cam. We have done a lot of experimentation because the Raymarch rendering is based on it comes from some client work that we've done for LiDAR, so like industry real-world scanning stuff, and then having very high-resolution rendering of that. And we tried making the surfaces be smooth and like lifelike instead of cubic. By the nature of the way that you need to Raymatch this on the GPU effectively, you're kind of really limited because the moment you have to start looking up neighbor data, it becomes tremendously slow. And if you don't do that, you cannot effectively make a smooth uniform whole. So like it's theoretically possible, but it's very costly and it never ends up looking as good as you want it to. So we've ended up just ditching our experiments and making it cubic only. Awesome. Those are, as far as I can tell, all of the questions that we have on the voxelization stuff.
Should we get into the other questions?
Yeah, I think that's good. So one that has come up a couple of times, which I do really want to touch on, is what is going on with voxel graphs. Obviously kind of an inevitable topic. Where we are at with voxel graphs, and there's like a bunch of different contexts to this question. We've had, you know, what happened to them in 2.0 because they're gone. Then there is, are they just being updated or are they being replaced or just being removed or what's the deal? So there's a whole bunch of questions and unclarity about that, which is entirely valid because we've not really talked about it clearly. The reason that we've not really talked about it clearly is because we don't really know. We want voxel graphs to come back, but the way they were designed in 1.2 on an infrastructure level was incredibly limiting, and actually also on a user-facing level was incredibly limiting. So voxel graphs as they are in 1.2 are just 100% out of the window, and they are not being upgraded or anything like that. They're just gone and they're never coming back. We do want to make another solution that does the same as that did and more. But it's with 2.0, we're trying to make the plugin be one big system from a UX perspective, rather than 17 separate systems that all do their own little bit. Which means that Voxel Graph is way more of a core design rather than just something that we stack on top of the existing plugin. So for instance, we want voxel graphs to be directly compatible with Landmass, and we want it to be directly compatible with the foliage clusters we've been working on. So all of these systems interplay. And that means that there is a buttload of variables that we have to take into account in terms of how we want to design voxel graphs. So we have a lot of ideas on what we want voxel graphs to do in 2.0. And we want to make it a lot more flexible, and we want a general graph framework that you can use for all sorts of different things. But exactly what it's going to be, we can't say anything about yet because we just really don't know. So stay tuned. Honestly, as soon as we have more on this, like the way that this is going to go development-wise is, at some point in the coming months, we are going to sit down and actually tackle this. We're going to pick a direction and do it, and then within 3 days, you will hear about it because it'll be on the GitHub, and Fi will make an excited tweet, and you will immediately see it in action. So the moment that we know what we're doing with this, you will know as well. So I don't have a satisfying answer to any of that, is the TLDR, but I hope that gives a bit of clarity on where we're at with it. Let me see. Somebody asked again with regards to the Landmass stuff specifically, whether that would be released build or editor only. Everything Landmass related, all of this actually works both in editor and real time exactly the same way. So you'll need to like make a UI and stuff for it yourself to make it work nicely. But all of this stuff works 100% real time. Then what is the speed difference in rendering with 2.0 compared to 1.2 using the mesh simplification? That depends where your bottleneck is. If your bottleneck is on raw GPU throughput, then it will make a really big difference. If your bottleneck is somewhere else, which it really often is, I would argue probably in the majority of games the bottleneck is on the render thread in draw calls and stuff, then it's not going to make any change at all.
It can actually help a bit because you have less vertex data, so it can speed up the entire pipeline a bit.
That's fair.
So we've actually seen work generate faster with mesh simplification enabled, because there's like much less to do per vertex compared to like you have much less vertex to do stuff on compared to the other one.
Yep. We should restart your NDI because you're delayed a bit.
Awesome.
So we're just going to recover Fi's face.
In just a bit. Here we go. Is that better?
Can you talk?
1, 2, 3.
It is not. That's great. Okay.
It's not better.
No, it's not. We'll live. It's not a disaster. He killed it again. Okay. Well.
Just maybe to really quickly touch that. Yeah, we still very much want to support procedural pipeline as well.
Yes.
Like we're showing a lot of static stuff, but yeah, I just want to make clear we are supporting procedural stuff.
So yeah, a lot of the stuff that we've been working on so far looks very manual, but that's because all of the procedural stuff hooks into voxel graphs kind of by necessity. Like all of the procedural stuff, including how we want to work with Landmass in procedural worlds, because we see that being a very powerful workflow. All of that stuff is directly tied into voxel graphs, which don't exist yet. So we can't easily demo any procedural stuff, but it's absolutely a core pillar to all of the design that we do, including on systems like Landmass that don't look like they're made for procedural. So yeah, everything that we're doing is still procedural. It is still a focus. We also want to do a way better job for non-procedural, but we're not exchanging it. We're still also doing procedural. Let's see. Somebody asked whether it's possible to have multiple voxel worlds and resolutions possible in a single UE world. Yeah, there's nothing stopping you from having multiple voxel worlds with all sorts of different settings, so go ham if you want to. It is also possible to, well, it is not possible, but we are exploring the possibility of having multiple voxel resolutions within a single voxel world, but plans on that are super nebulous, so don't expect anything. But it is something that we're exploring conceptually.
Will Voxel Landmass also work with dynamic meshes? Yes, you might just have to do some custom API on top of the existing stuff. But basically, all the plugin needs like an array of position and an array of indices. So as long as you can give it that, you can make it work with any mesh you want, even postural meshes.
We have a bunch of questions touching on texturing and materials and multi-index. And materials are in a tricky spot, similar to voxel graphs, where we know that we're not happy with what we've got in 1.2, and that we have a whole bunch of design parameters for what we want the 2.0 solution to be like, but we don't actually have the solution yet. So we can't go too in depth on what we're doing on that, but we for similar use cases to original multi-index, not the landscape multi-index, not the landscape conversions, but original multi-index, we expect a significantly faster version of the same thing with more or less the same capabilities and nicer UX. So we hope to do more or less the same thing on that. And Landmass and stuff, everything can write any sort of data channel, which means it can also write any material data. Again, we haven't demoed it because we don't have multi-index and stuff working, so I can't show you a nice voxel world with a multi-index material and then the multi-index material changing based on the Landmass stuff. But that is coming. My game is a list. Yeah, okay. So my game is a listen server that does not use world partition system. Am I still going to be able to use this for multiplayer? Yeah. So I didn't want to touch on multiplayer at the start of the stream because I wanted to get into the actual topic, like the things that we talked about beforehand that we were going to talk about. But I do want to touch on it. Where we're at with multiplayer is that we've decided to drop the features that we advertised for 1.2, such as the TCP and ICP replication, because they didn't work. They added a massive amount of maintenance overhead for us. And the reality is that when you're making a game with like large-scale voxel terrains and editable landscapes and stuff, and it's multiplayer, you need to be a decent engineer. So if you are not at the engineering level where you can figure out how to do the replication of the voxel data yourself, you would likely run into loads and loads of issues either way, even if we did have those things implemented for you already, because multiplayer is a massive pain in the ass. That's just honestly where it's at. So we've decided not to do any of the user-facing implementation. What we do intend to do is we want to add all of the hooks to make it as easy as possible to add the RPC and the proper replication calls yourself. So we will, you know, if you're using a traditional world creation workflow where you sculpt the terrain and stuff and you have edits being done on runtime, we will implement the featured functions that you need to get the delta between the original terrain and the edited terrain so that you can easily replicate it to connecting clients. But we will not actually give you a nice function to automatically replicate that to other clients, because that should be something that you can handle yourself. So we will handle the voxel side of the replication, but we will be staying away from touching any of the core replication tech.
And to caveat all that, this is only if you want to do multiplayer with like edits being replicated. If you want to use multiplayer but with static world, it just works. There's nothing specific to be done.
Yes. It's also worth noting that if you were to do multiplayer and you only use Landmass to design your worlds in 2.0, then you're just using actors and there is nothing stopping you whatsoever from replicating everything because you're just replicating actors and then everything will work.
Yeah, so you would need to do it to like add a crater as just spawn an actor and it would be automatically replicated and would just work on every client. Do you want to get into showcasing your project maybe?
No, there's actually a couple more interesting questions that I've intentionally been leaving because I wanted to go through some really quick ones initially. And I'm also just going through everything. So documentation we touched on, voxel graph we touched on, performance improvements in 2.0 with smooth voxels are quite broad, but on the whole, everything in the plugin is faster. Literally everything is faster. And it's really hard to quantify because it's not just we've made this function faster, it's we rewrote basically everything about the plugin and the architecture is better and the design is better and the way we've done the math is more clever and more low-level optimizations and stuff. So just everything is faster on every front. So we can't quantify it, but it is just faster. So that is a really excellent answer, but I hope it gives you food for thought. Does the Landmass solution support selectively baking changes, i.e. your crater example? If you wanted that to no longer be a live brush, can you bake out the changes from it specifically? No. And this might be something that we explore in the future, but kind of by design, the idea behind Landmass is to completely circumvent the premise of having baked data in your landscape. So instead of doing that, like the actual brushes are really quite cheap. So
yeah, the gist of it is that it's cheaper to have them as brushes rather than baking. So there's no need to do any baking to make it faster. It would actually make it slower.
Yeah, so somebody asked whether the terrain stuff, like the spline-based editing and stuff, will also work on multi-index, and no, it currently doesn't, but it will work on whatever comes to replace multi-index. Is nanite foliage supported? I believe it's currently not, but there's no technical reason for it to not work. Your camera froze. Did it die? Oh no, it's back.
Maybe. One user actually made a fork of the plugin with nanite support for foliage.
Yep.
So you can check that out if you want.
Somebody asked us whether they could see the Lumen overview for your demo.
Let me load the project again, and you can switch to another question in the meantime.
Will Voxel plugin support geometry functionality? And I assume that is with regards to like the procedural, well, not procedural, the BSP style editor. I think they're kind of by nature largely incompatible workflows. It might be something we explore down the line, but it's very much not a priority. Will actor classes be fully supported with foliage so we can add logic to trees, for instance, instead of removing the voxel mesh?
Yeah, we want to do a lot of fun things with foliage.
Yes.
Maybe I can expand a bit on that. So what we want to do is really make a generic workflow that will generate points, and then you would have your own render class to render these points. So we want to like interface with like the regular instance meshes that we already have with some actor spawning. We also want to add an interface with like the mass ECS system to really allow you to do anything with foliage, really to really expand that as much as possible.
Very quick and easy question. Is 2.0 a separate product or is an upgrade for pro customers? Wait, Fi, did you die? Oh no, you're back. Okay, great. Your camera is freezing quite regularly, so I keep being like, is he dead? So 2.0 is sort of a separate product. 2.0 will have a different license configuration. What we've pretty much settled on is that for Fi, are we going to actually talk about the license terms that we've talked about?
Maybe not just yet.
Okay. so far, our plan is more or less to move 2.0 to a per-seat license, i.e. actually start enforcing the license that 1.2 already has. Because so far we've been lenient on it because there was a lot of confusion about plugin licenses.
You can talk about it.
So what our plan is now is 2.0 will be per seat, but we will provide a license separate, which you can sign if you are an entity with revenue under some amount. We haven't quite decided yet, where you will have a full license for your product without needing to pay extra. So for small companies, you will still just purchase a single copy of Voxel plugin and have the entire plugin for your entire product, for the entire team. Whereas as a larger company, you will need to pay for a per seat license, and you will likely want to contact us to actually talk about the details of how we can make that work.
So yeah, keep it if you're an indie, nothing will change. And it will just be a free upgrade.
Yep. And yeah, so either way, all licenses that exist will upgrade. It's just, if you're a large company, that single license will no longer be enough for the entire production. So Lumen. Oh yeah, you've already been showing that, so that's fine.
Yep, Lumen scene.
What are your thoughts on including a biplanar material / shader like Inigo showcased on Shader Toy? No particular thoughts. It's a relatively straightforward material thing. The issue with biplanar compared to triplanar is that you have quite a lot of limitations on how much cool stuff you can do within the material when it comes to blending. So for instance, if you use height blending, you can't have large transition areas anymore because you now only have, you can't have all three samples blend together. You can only have two. So you limit the blend area, which is less creative freedom. So most likely our stock stuff will always be triplanar, but nothing would stop you from just replacing all the material functions in, like, all of the triplanar functions with biplanar equivalents, and other than that, using the exact same material. Then what about multiplayer collision on a voxel world? The voxel world needs to be generated on the server in order to have collision, but so long as you generate the areas where you need collision, which you can just do using player invokers or using forced LED volumes, you're absolutely fine.
Yeah, it will just work.
Can you add texture bombing? We could. We're probably not going to because it's very much a project-specific feature, but we are looking at doing some other cool tech which would make texture bombing largely obsolete. And I will leave it at that, and then you can try and figure out what that will be. Will there be a focus on large spherical planet voxel generation? I'm switching to the two-way camera as well. The short answer to that is honestly just no. Being very honest, with almost everything we do, with all of the 2.0 generation, with all of the 2.0 work that we've done so far, planets have come up once or twice as considerations in the things we're implementing, because they add so much complexity to every single thing. So it's like, we want to have it work, and in the end, with most features, we will find a way to make it work, but it's not going to be the absolute top-notch experience that the rest of the plugin is intended to be, because it's always going to be a bit jank and like serving a very niche audience with very high complexity for maintenance. So unfortunately, that's not going to be something that we can sustainably have as a high-class citizen of the plugin very long-term.
Yeah, we won't drop Planet, but we will support them as much as we can, but we won't like focus a lot of our time on Planet.
Yeah. Let me see. Right, so when doing huge edits in runtime, it uses a lot of RAM. Is this still something we have to keep in mind? So this is interesting about the Landmass workflow specifically. Landmass uses brushes rather than having the full world data in memory, which means that so long as you only use Landmass brushes, which currently is also the only option, you can't actually use manual edits. It's other discussion that will come, but kind of as a, you can do this if you really need to, but you usually shouldn't kind of thing. The idea is that you only have the RAM reserved for the actual meshes that you use in the world. So every mesh that you have in the world will be voxelized at the resolution it needs to be voxelized. If you have that mesh in the world 10 times, it will be voxelized once at the highest resolution that is needed. And then all of those instances will use that bit of RAM, basically. So what that means is that so long as you use a limited amount of meshes to do your world design, so long as you're mindful of that, you can create an absolutely humongous world with very small memory footprint. So, you know, on the whole, on small worlds with Landmass, you will be using more RAM, but on large worlds, you will be using significantly less RAM using Landmass.
Yeah. So yeah, the portions I showed earlier, you can really scale them to be really huge without any change in memory use.
Yeah.
Something we also want to do is experiment with edit LODs, so to speak, or like edit sizes. And that's still very experimental, and we don't know if we really want to go that way, but the idea would be for you to be able to sculpt data at like a maybe 1 kilometer resolution. So you could make like a huge continent or something without using too much memory. And then you could add some finer detail at a lower resolution. So really only paying the price for the detail you have and not for the resolution itself.
Wow, your webcam is super delayed. It's like really ridiculous. Awesome. Let's go restart that again. Hooray, hooray. The joys. Let me know when you're back up. So then there's one very broad question, which is more high-level question about the project. How sustainable, long-term, viable is this project? How are you funded? Are you taking or open to investment? The gist of it is no, we are not taking or open to investment. We're always open to talk for interesting opportunities, but if you are just a party that is considering like investing as a business thing rather than because you're super interested in the product and like want to let us do our thing basically, then it's already a hard no. And if it is something other than that, then we can have a chat, but in all likelihood it is still a no. Because we don't need money, we are sustainable as we are. We are sustainable to scale the team a little bit more as we are actually doing at the moment. We are funded entirely through the sales on the marketplace and through our client work. So the project is going to be around for quite a while, assuming nothing disastrous happens, unless Epic suddenly releases their own plugin and absolutely buries us. You know, assuming nothing really weird or destructive like that happens, we're going to be around and we will be sustainable and just continuing to do the stuff that we're very passionate about, because we care more about making a really good tool than we care about making a lot of money.
Awesome. Maybe what we can do is you can switch to showing your product, and I can like answer the last few questions as they come up in the chat.
Yep, sounds good.
That sounds good to you?
Yep.
Awesome.
Let's move all that. Oh, right. Yeah, let's go back to the two-way camera for just a second while I figure out where the hell I have my projects. What we charge for client work depends very much on the client, and if you're seriously considering doing things with the plugin on a complex, large project basis, you should reach out to us through email at contact@voxelplugin.com. It's worth noting that we don't do contract development or anything. We work with people that use the plugin and we help them integrate the plugin more effectively, but we don't actually help them develop their own products aside from the plugin implementation. I have too many windows open. Alrighty, here is my screen. Okay, So let's see how broken things are actually, because I haven't touched this project in quite a while, and I did recently update the plugin version in it, so it might actually be kind of sad. For instance, I'm not seeing my grass generate, which is rather unfortunate. Fi, would you happen to have any ideas?
What's happening?
Well, I am not getting any grass generating.
Awesome. Yeah, you need to set up the densities again. If you open your grass banner, you need to manually set the densities again.
What?
In theory. Can you... Yeah, so check Landmass, grass. Yeah, okay, so did you update to the latest?
Maybe not. Should I?
No.
Maybe I did. I might.
Because if you updated, it should have reset the density part. Control F5 doesn't do anything?
Nope.
Didn't you have some local change? No, you did not. Maybe try updating and see if that does anything.
So this is why we kept this part of the stream for last. I will go back to the two-way camera for a bit.
I will answer some questions in the meantime.
Yes.
Add surface object. Yeah, so the limitations there will be that it's still mashing cubes behind the scenes. So it will be limited in some way. So you won't be able to like voxelize a building in a perfect way. It will look pretty blobby. And yeah, so to follow up on the other question, yeah, I want to add support for like multi-blocks, like doors in Minecraft, or like, you know, a chest or something, because they are so very nice. There's no support for them for now. You need to run the update plugin.
Yeah, no, actually I don't. I did also, but I needed to yeet the other one. I had some local changes to fix foliage, to fix the hierarchical and static mesh. So this is the version from before you fixed UE5. Which might explain things being broken. Okay, I'm compiling.
Water example. So we have several type of water in the plugin now. I have some experimental GPU water with some very simple GPU propagation thingy. And then there's the landmass water, which is just a flood field to help you make like a lake or something like that. For Cubic, I would also like to investigate more like maybe Minecraft-like water. We do some local simulation, some very basic stuff that still looks pretty good. Voxel plugin was updated to UE5. Large world coordinate stuff took quite a bit of work, but it is working with it. So it should just work.
The joys of compiling.
Yeah.
Maybe I need that thread ripper that you keep talking about.
Awesome. Do you want to compile from...
From what?
From Rider or something? Because it says it failed.
Yeah, I will. But actually the reason for that is this.
Oh yeah.
Because you didn't update that.
Nope. Have you considered using static meshes as is and using Boolean operation? So if you start getting into manual mesh operation, then you can lose the power of the voxel data, which is to have this unified voxel representation. So it's not really something we want to get into. It's much smoother or much nicer for us to convert the mesh to the distance field, and then subtract that distance field from the world distance field, and then mesh that result rather than doing it on the mesh side. And yes, Goosey should definitely have a sword fight while he's compiling.
Yeah, I actually responded to that in chat right as you said it. I was like, yeah, my swords are downstairs, so I can't. Also, I'm by myself in the house, so I'd have to have a sword fight with myself. Or with the dog, but she's asleep. So that's kind of a separate thing.
Awesome, it's starting.
Progress.
So you're compiling shaders, of course.
That's how
part
that
of the
goes.
fun.
Yeah, you know it. Let's see how many viewers we're losing. Oh, we're actually not losing viewers throughout this at all. That's really impressive.
Yeah, not that much. Can you maybe share my screen again?
Yes, of course. Let me pull up OBS. Yep. Yes. Good job.
So yeah, so if you want to try the 2.0 beta, we don't recommend using it for any kind of production usage. It's probably going to not compile, it's probably going to break, your assets might be corrupted from one update to another. But if you do want to try it, you can go to our GitHub. If you don't have access to the GitHub, you can DM the verification bot on Discord, which will give you access to the GitHub. And then you can clone the master branch, and if you compile this, you will have the latest 2.0. So you can see the latest committed from yesterday over there.
On the topic of landmass and actors, do you need to add a component to any actors interact with the Voxel plugin terrain? Yes.
So on the plugin side, it's a low-level API. So on the C++ side, you could really make it. You can have like your own actor class or your own component class. You can really make anything you want. On the blueprint side, you currently need an actor, a specific type of actor to affect the terrain. But we might expand the API to be nicer and let you either use a component or even just code a function in Blueprint to add a brush to the terrain without actually using an actor. The procedural pipeline got changed a bit, and Goosey might show that actually.
What is that referring to? Yes, I see.
Procedural food, yeah.
Yeah, I'll show that in a minute.
And yeah, we have like a new spawner system and cluster system. We still need to do some work on it, but it's been improved quite a bit.
Ah, fuck. So, Unreal is fighting OBS for cause.
Awesome. If we had infinite time and funding, what we would change about the plugin? I would say we would still stay on the same course. It would just be a lot faster, like stay on it longer, I guess.
Yep, agreed. Yeah, okay, so time to...
Do you want to share your screen?
Yes. Yes, okay, here is my beautiful screen. What was it? Shift F11, there we go. Okay, so let's see, I have grass now. So all of these, just for a little bit of context, all of these little cylindery things are human-sized objects. The voxel resolution in this world is 50 centimeters per voxel. And unfortunately, I yeeted all of the pretty things I made for a client demonstration, and then I produced very ugly things to replace it, unfortunately. So, yes. So, that is slightly unfortunate. But this does give you a bit more of an idea of what you can achieve with Landmass in terms of fidelity. So... one of the things that is incredibly powerful and pleasant about Landmass in terms of usage is that you can get so much out of so little. So say I want to make like a little canyon plateau. Let's just do a bunch of stuff from scratch. Let's see, how many threads do I have this on? 4. That's fine. So actually let's enable the previews as well so I can actually see what I'm doing before the generation finishes. So let's say I do something like this, and obviously this is like a hollow mesh, so it wouldn't quite be perfect for this, but that's fine because I just take another one of these and rotate that around it. And then select these, up the smoothness a little bit. And now we have a very nice little canyon looking plateau-y thing, like a little mesa. Now, the great thing is, obviously, these are non-destructive objects, so I can just spend a bunch of time making a nice one, or making multiple nice variations of this, and then copy-pasting them around, rotating them, scaling them a little bit, because that all just works, because they're normal actors. And then additionally, I can go, well, actually, you know, I would like these to be subtractive instead. Now, the tricky thing here would be actually that I'd have to invert them on the Z scale for that to work nicely, but what I can just do is that. Now we invert it, and we have a lovely subtractive mesa terrain thing. Let's move that a little bit. So you can see that like the updating isn't instant. This scales linearly with the amount of threads available for the plugin to use. So right now I've set it to 4 threads, which is attainable on like most mid to high end systems nowadays. Not on everything. It works fine with fewer cores, it's just slow to generate. But again, bear in mind that this is 50 centimeters. So like going from 200 centimeters like Fi's project to 50 centimeters, the standard is usually around 100 centimeters. So from 100 to 50 is a 4 times increase in complexity because it's in 3 dimensions instead of 2 like a height map.
8 times.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, being an idiot. This, again, human size object, this gives you an idea of like the level of detail that you get out of this. The really great thing with this sort of workflow is, you know, I now have this mesa, and let's say I also have this canyon coming out of it. Sorry, like a ridge. I can just scale that. Oh, that does interesting things. Let's reduce the stride. Oh yeah, something else worth mentioning. This isn't a thing yet, so you can see how we have all these bulges forming on the intersection of these meshes. It's also worth noting that these are not really the best case meshes to be doing this sort of spline thing with. But these bulges are something that we're looking to fix, because right now the smoothness applies on everything, including inside itself. So like these meshes blob together. We are intending to separate that so that you have spline smoothing, so like within the spline itself, and then blending the spline with the rest of the world, so you can set separate values for those so that you can have no smoothing between the instances but still have the nice smoothing into the terrain underneath it, which should be very nice. That is interesting. Let's not do that right now. But what's great about this is obviously it gives you a lot of power for making fast, high quality stuff. So instead of having to tediously position every single one of these things and then manually blending everything in nicely, you just plop everything down. And I'm not showing this right now because I'm just duplicating stuff, but if I go in here and I hit Alt-V to go into Voxel Landmass mode, I can just grab any of these objects. It'll freeze for just a second as it voxelizes the object, and then I can move it around. I can be like, okay, that's great. I now want this thingy sitting on top. Yeah. Yes, you can say.
And you can notice how like the foliage is updated when you do that.
Yep.
Like since the get-go, yeah, we have grass everywhere just walking.
I'm really quite sad that I yeeted all of the pretty stuff I had done with this. I'd kind of forgotten that I'd done that. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's the thing.
So sometimes there are some minor issues with like the detection of updates, but you know, you refresh the world and that's fixed, and it's just a matter of this being a very early version of everything. Like the entire plugin is very much getting changes made to it every single night. So things move and break quickly. Oh yeah, we also have these gizmos. I don't know how nice they are right now because obviously I don't have... Yeah. It's nice when things work, isn't it?
I think you're supposed to rotate them.
Well, no, you can see that it's changing in the inspector panel, but...
Yeah, maybe it's due to the priority.
Yeah, that's it. But yeah, this is super cool how, like, I am not a level designer, but very enthusiastic about level design. And the power that this gives you in how you create worlds out of just like 5 objects is tremendous. I see you've been answering lots of questions through typing.
Do you want to show the foliage clusters as well?
Yes, let's do that. So yeah, fun thing, these can these volumes can write to any channel. So I can say write to a material channel to do this, and apparently, oh right, of course the grass is broken and now spawns everywhere. That's fine. That's just Fi's fault. But if I set this to be a foliage brush, would that also broke, of course.
Yeah, see, that's why you don't really want to use 2.0 for now, because this can happen at any time.
I want to use a scaler, right? Watch it crash.
You want to use the Landmass.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, which one?
Density.
Thank you. Oh yeah, there we go.
Here we go.
Okay,
you probably want to invert it.
Perfection.
And you might want to invert the brush as well. Yeah, here we go.
Okay, well, that's a little bit counterintuitive. That's just sort of UX thing that we need to fix. I'm kind of miffed with where my shadows have disappeared to, admittedly. Oh, there we go. That does make a bit of a difference, doesn't it? Right, this project suddenly looks a lot less crappy. Took me surprisingly long to notice it. Well, I did kind of notice it, but then I didn't want to go figure out why. Yeah, so a little bit of an annoying thing right now is that I can't easily select this brush, so I have to like go through the list to find it. I renamed it and now it died. Let's see if I can replicate that. Okay, that one's still there. Where the heck did... What? Oh, now it's there. There we go. Okay, well, that was interesting. Some issue with the re-registration of the components there. Anyway, so I can use these to create foliage spawning areas as well. And obviously I can set the density of these through the spawning system. So let's take a look at that spawning system. So here we have, we still have the old collection system that's kind of going to go. We have to do a UX pass on this. It's not great right now. But the functionality is the interesting part of this system. So what we have here is this layer-based system. So this is all the usual spawning stuff, which we're all used to from 1.2. This is the interesting part. So this is an array of foliage entries, nice and cryptic. You'll see each of these has a foliage type, a spawn radius, and a radial distance. I'm actually going to go ahead and make a new VFS, because that will make it easier to actually show what is happening with it. Okay, so and obviously you can already see here, this all updates in this viewport, so you don't need to look at your world and wait for it all to generate before you can actually see things happening.
Yeah, it also updates the world live. So if you had the two side by side, it would update everything at once.
Yes. So we have these types here, which I've already made in the past, so we're just going to use those. These are quite similar to what the old ones used to be. So if we go in here, it's just an array of meshes. It picks one based on the strength. You can override the materials if you want to. You can spawn an actor if you want to, and then all the rendering settings. Nothing especially special here. Scaling and rotation settings, etc. are all per type rather than per cluster. So right now, this is not doing anything particularly interesting because we have a spawn radius of 0 to 0 and a radial distance, which means that it can only spawn a single one. If we set this to 0 to 500, you'll see that it's now in this entire sphere just spawning these trees. Now they're a bit close together for these kinds of trees, so we might want to boop the radial distance up a little bit. So once we do that, you'll see, oh yeah, we need to fix radial distance because it's kind of wonky. I've been complaining about this quite a lot, but anyway, that will come at some point. Now we have a lower amount of these, but realistically, these are big trees. We probably don't really want a lot of these. So we're going to, say, increase that a little bit. Actually, no, we're not going to do that. So there are two design approaches that you can do with the clusters. One is to have clusters that define an entire forest. The other one is to define individual clusters that make up the forest, and then like each large tree is its own cluster and has stuff spawned around it. I feel like that is the preferred way to do it. So in this case, I'll set the spawn radius back to 0. We'll only spawn this one in the center. Now we can add another entry. And obviously these sorts of large trees generally have smaller trees scattered around them. So we can say, well, we don't want them to be right inside the big tree. So let's say we move this over a bit. And obviously, again, we want to increase the radial distance. We don't want quite that many of them. But now you can see that these are starting to appear around the base of the tree rather than right at it, which I think is pretty good. So we're going to do that. Then probably, yeah, definitely still too many of these here. So let's do 400. So occasionally you'll have quite a few on a tree, but usually it'll not be too much. So what this gives you is just like a tree and these two bushes generating around it. What I'm actually going to do here is on here, I'm going to change this to use the VFS test just so you can see what that does. Right, it currently has a stupendous density. Let me just change that. Okay, there we go. That's more reasonable, isn't it? Oh, that's great. Generation distance and all that. And they are not casting shadows. Oh, the sun is just behind a cloud. Okay, that happens. So let's bring this back and let's split screen this stuff. That's not the one I meant. Oh, yeah, because this one is maximized. Let's split screen this and full screen that. So this is the voxel world, obviously. So let's say we're happy with how these little trees are spawning around the big tree. So now we're going to add some ground cover because forests have, you know, ferns and that sort of thing. So we can just do this. And ideally you'd also remove the grass when doing this sort of thing and paint another texture, etc. But we're not doing that right now. So let's say we start at 120 and we go up to 400. Now these are absolutely tiny, which I don't love. Okay, that's more like it. So you'll now see that we already immediately get this really satisfying scattering around these, because obviously these are ferns, so you want them scattered more densely. What this means basically is you just get a very easy way to produce quite convincing forests. Like obviously this is not a convincing landscape. Let me increase the generation distance on this. I am confused, which is always great.
Make sure your chunk size is big enough.
Yeah.
So it needs to be much bigger than the distance between clusters. And you probably want to drop your generation distance now.
But Phi, I want lots of trees.
Oh, you ticked. Yeah, you ticked infinite generation distance below. So of course it's taking
Up.
a bit too long.
That'll do it. Is there any real impact to changing the chunk size? It's lower resolution positioning, right?
As long as the chunk size, yeah. You just need to make sure that the chunk size is always bigger than the distance between clusters. Otherwise you won't have any cluster per chunk.
Yes. Okay, so we now have something like this. Say we just want some... Let's yeet this and go back to having actual things on screen. And let's yeet the place actor panel because I really don't need it. Let's see if we have a nice little... Actually, I think I have a mountain somewhere. Yes, perfect. These will generate a distance field for me. Perfect. That is actually exactly what I was going for. That was not exactly what I was going for. What I was going for was something like this. So obviously the material is not, you know, mind-blowing or anything like that, and we don't have a whole lot of variation going on in terms of what's being spawned and rocks and more bush types and that sort of thing. But this does give you an idea of more or less the kind of ease with which you can produce quite convincing results for a forest. Because obviously when you do procedural generation, you'll always lose some amount of fidelity compared to just placing everything manually. But on the whole, when you compare something like this to doing everything by hand, and obviously also bear in mind that I'm being super fast about how I'm doing this right now. This is so much faster for perfectly adequate results that like most gamers would be perfectly content with. If you look at most modern games and procedural forests within them, they feel kind of haphazardly scattered. This gets around that. It does the natural clustering that objects do in fact follow in the real world. Things congregate around things. That's kind of how the natural world works. So if you have a big boulder somewhere, then you will have small rocks around it, and then you'll have pebbles around those. Such a cluster system lets you really easily do that, and it saves you the hassle of having to have an artist manually place every single one of those little rocks and then painting pebbles on around it manually. Because instead you can just go, I want rocks in this area, and it will generate the boulders and then generate all of the other stuff around them effectively based on your instructions. Somebody's asking what asset pack these trees are from. These trees are not from an asset pack. These are trees I have made, so unfortunately you can't get these anywhere. Even if I wanted to redistribute them, I can't because they were made in SpeedTree and their license does not permit you to redistribute what you've made. I think that's more or less the interesting stuff here. Like, I can just keep going and do more fun-looking stuff, but...
No, yeah, I think you went over quite a bit already.
Oh, yeah, one fun thing that I will say is obviously you can do this sort of thing. and have a big forest, but then you can also still decide retroactively, actually in this little area, I want to put a house. So you do that, and you make sure that it comes after it in the priority. And now you get a little clearing. So now I can, you know, actually build a house here. See if I have a house. The rest of these assets are Cinti assets, which most people will probably recognize. Let's do a sad house. If it even has a... Oh, right. Yeah, we're in Landmass mode. Let's disable that. That is not what I was going for in terms of fidelity.
So yeah, as I said earlier, we support any type of mesh, even houses.
Yeah, which won't look that great, but it does theoretically work. Excuse? I'm missing a rather significant amount of assets in this project. Unhappy me noises? What? Like, actually, what? Okay, then. That is fascinating. Well, anyway, then you know, I'll just have to, like, place a watchtower or something, I guess. We'll place a boathouse in the middle of the forest. Anyway, point being, you can do a little clearing and just... Right, what I wanted to actually tick here, not infinite generation, I wanted to not despawn them.
You can't do that.
Aww,
You can increase the generation distance though. So like if you set it to 1k, and probably increase the chunk size a bit to 64.
There we go. That's a little bit better. So my partner just came home, which means the dog is now activated. Sure, in a bit. Anyway, the point of this is, like, it's really easy and, like, fun to make stuff with this, and obviously, like, I can also just go, actually, I also want, you know, a little mountainy looking thing here, and this isn't generally the sort of mountain that you'd put here, but because you have so much flexibility with how you use these assets, you can, like, squish it a little bit and then have a bunch of smoothness on it, and reduce the strength a little bit to fade it out towards the top, and then you end up with something that you can actually kind of feasibly have in this sort of terrain. So it gives you so much freedom to really easily make satisfying looking terrains, which would usually be a pain. Yeah, I would spend more time with this. And it's worth noting that large brushes are not necessarily the fastest that they can be right now. We are looking at other solutions for super huge brushes to make them faster, basically. Such as using non-voxelized things, just using like a texture-based stamp, effectively. Because that could potentially speed things up quite significantly. Right, so this is iffy, obviously. I wouldn't actually want that, so what I can do... Right now I have to duplicate it for this. But down the line you won't have to. But I can scale this a bit and have it
Priority.
take away from the foliage. Thank you. Yeah, so that's easy to forget. And now we won't have trees randomly generating on top of, you know, our rock pillar, because that is kind of strange when it does that. Right, yeah, no, I should have left that smoothness. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all I've got. I can show you the clouds that I have here, but they're not really anything voxel related. They're nice and fluffy. This is all modified ultradynamic sky, so it's not that special.
You know, I think that was perfect. Again, it's been like 2 hours since the start of the stream, so we can probably wrap it up.
Yeah. Did we still get any sort of meaningful questions that we still need to answer, or did you touch on everything?
No, I think I answered everything. Yeah, if you have any more questions, feel free to join the Discord and ask them there. Even if you don't have a question, you should join the Discord.
Yes,
it's just discord.voxelplugin.com.
To be fair, to be clear, Croco King, like you can use any static mesh with the foliage system. Like anything that you buy on the marketplace will work with our foliage system. It's just specifically like the foliage painting tool in the Unreal Landscape system that you can't merge with the voxel stuff. Have you seen Keen Software House's water?
Nope.
They do lots of cool stuff, so that is worth looking at. Time frame for release, sometime 2022.
Yeah.
Small team, lots of big plans. Hard to say. Like, we literally have a single engineer doing all of this, so it's tricky. Alrighty. Assuming no more questions come in like the next 2 or 3 minutes, because I'm fine with just sitting here for a second to make sure we've covered everything. But assuming nothing else comes in, we will round off and move on. Will there be early access bugs and all? Yes, actually. Absolutely. Yeah, so actually with regards to how clients respond to that, we don't work with clients that don't line up with our development schedule. So like if a client says we really need this feature to make our game and that isn't a feature that we're already working on, then we will tell that client that it's not on the roadmap and it doesn't make sense for us to work with them and that they might want to look at another solution. So we only work with clients that work with our development timeline and schedule, because obviously we do have timelines for individual features, we just don't have a timeline for a full release to be done. Hey Jello, yes, microvoxelization is covered earlier in the stream. We're actually about to wrap up.
Yeah, we'll have the stream available on YouTube with timestamp afterward.
Yes. Alrighty, then we shall leave it at this. Thank you everybody for joining us, especially the people that made it all the way to the end somehow throughout my foliage rambling, etc. Is there a replacement in mind for importing splats and hype maps when multi-index is removed? Yes. That's a little bit of an edge conversation to the baked data. Like the baked data we think about is mainly with regards to density and that sort of thing, but we do very much see the need for being able to import things like height map base layers, weight map base layers, and that sort of thing. But that is separate from having full manually edited voxel data stored for the entire world. That's what we're dismissing, but we are keeping like base generator data. So it isn't in right now, but it will be in for 2.0 at some point. Okay, again, gonna continue where I left off. Thank you all for joining us. It's been very fun to do this. We definitely want to do more of these. They might not be quite as long as this one, and they might not have as much interesting stuff to show, because obviously this is a bit of an amalgamation of things we have been doing the past months. So if we do them more frequently, we'll likely have a little bit less. But yeah, on the whole, been very fun. Thank you for joining, and hope to see you again in the next one, and in the Discord if you're not there already. Alrighty. Let's leave it at that then. Cheers, guys. Have a lovely rest of your day. Bye-bye.